The facts in the economic crisis. Most people think that we got into this economic crisis by a series of unfortunate random events or blunders. Not true. It is a century-old, cleverly planned, incremental destruction of the rights and freedoms of the masses by a parasitical enemy. In order to fight this spiral into tyranny, you must know who the real enemy is. The controlled media won't tell you, as they are totally controlled by the enemy and used to mislead you. The government won't help, since they are bought by the enemy and are beholden to them. We got into this tragedy by centuries of patient planning and incremental manipulation of our economy by elected officials under the command and control of a world banking cartel owned by a handful of families and their giant industrial corporate friends. It wasn't easy for them, but it took the elite banking families about 200 years to get to this juncture in the USA, which is the crossroads between total world domination of all governments under a totalitarian tyranny enforced by the rich elite. Their goal is nothing short than the destruction of the U.S. Constitution and total domination and control of the world's population. It is a known fact that the large banking syndicates have loaned both sides of warring nations the money to fund their armies in order to gain political and financial control. The banking cartel's effort to dominate and control the world's governments by a New World Order facade has been usually viewed by some as a conspiracy theory. However, current events have proven that it is no longer a theory, but a real conspiracy. When the Constitution was written, our founding fathers were aware of the bankers' tactics, and so provided Congress the power to create our own currency in order to avoid the very trap that hooked in our elected officials today. Prior to 1913, Congress had the constitutional duty to determine the amount of money needed to supply the needs of the people, business, and foreign commerce. The currency was backed by gold, so that Congress was restrained from printing too much fiat currency. In 1913, a group of bankers convinced Congress to turn the duty of currency creation over to a corporate entity called the Federal Reserve. This corporation is privately owned by a cartel of large banks, owned by these families. It is no more federal than Federal Express, and they pay no taxes. Since that time, the Federal Reserve has controlled interest rates and charged us interest on that money that we borrowed from them. Congress then created an unconstitutional tax called the income tax to pay for that interest. In 1971, the bankers of the world convinced the government to abandon the gold standard and allow the value of the U.S. dollar to float against other currencies. From that time on, the money we borrowed from the Federal Reserve was created out of thin air, but we still had to pay interest on that thin air. Fast forward today and see what our present policies have done for us. The Federal Reserve banking cartel has just placed us into many trillions of dollars of debt with the help of the bailout, destroyed our economy, and placed us into involuntary servitude, not only for you, but your progeny. The bailouts also gave the banks unlimited credit to literally buy up all of America. Are we for sale? Are we going to allow that? This has all been planned and well carried out behind the scenes with the media, your elected officials cheering the farce along, while the populace worked, played, and were basically detached and distracted from this evil plot. Although for decades the banking influence has controlled things politically to some degree, the Bush family has been a willing participant to the bankers' New World Order scam, and has been vastly accelerated during Bush Jr.'s reign as he instituted the political and military tools to enforce this abortion on the American people. Since the Patriot Act was written years before the 9/11 incident, we now see the true reason for its existence: to keep us in line if we object to this travesty. Your representatives are not stupid, but hirelings of the enemy, and with the exception of a few, such as Ron Paul, are too busy feathering their personal and political fortunes by taking the bribes offered up by the bank-controlled corporations and ignoring the people's work, Constitution, and Bill of Rights. Each of your elected representatives at all levels, including state and local, swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. Have they? If not, is that not treason? Although the calls and mail to Congress were well over 100 to 1 against the bailout, sufficient numbers of Congress and Senate voted for it. So much for the will of the people. Would you vote to place yourself and future progeny into involuntary servitude to do the will of the elite banking families? Well, that's just what your representatives did for you. Is there a way out of this mess? Short of an all-out revolution, the only way to take the country and Constitution back is incrementally. First, clean out the politicians that have not done the work of its citizens and are derelict in defending and supporting the Constitution. Next, dissolve the Federal Reserve and take back our currency. Make Congress responsible for money creation as required by the Constitution. Pay off the debt to the Federal Reserve with a government check created and backed by the same thin air they loaned us. Pay legitimate loans to other countries, entities, and so forth, utilizing existing tax to accomplish. Then eliminate the income tax. Of course, this would force Congress and government to focus on legitimate functions outlined in the Constitution and eliminate those services better handled in the private sector. But that's a good start.